Okay, there we go. We're live. So, it wants us to start with a quick summary of the case. Does anyone know what's on the case this week?
I think it was very interesting, but I also I don't want to sound like a coward, but if somebody tells me, don't get in there, I will be like, nope, you're right, I'm not getting in there, because it seems very. I mean, as I was reading, it seemed like a big challenge, People, especially you start with the staff being not happy, and then you have all these freezes, and hiring freezes, and then you're like, how can I motivate my employees? Because believe it or not, one of the biggest motivations to people is money, or giving them less work. But if you cannot do anything, then you're like, what can I do to make them happy, to make them stay and work still motivated? I as I say, before, I work in a restaurant, and my manager, every now and then, she says, good job, great job with the table and blah blah, or during the pre-shift, she's like, hey, you guys have been doing good, even though it's been slow and whatnot, but when I wrote my paper, I mean, I'm sorry, when I wrote my paper for the week, I pointed out that, to give some sort of feedback, praise, and that can go, it can go long ways, even like employee of the week or employee of the month, even if there is not like an actual prize, meaning like a gift card or stuff like this, material. Just put it like in a little like plaque, be like, employee of the day of the week, Mister something something, and then people will be more motivated. It could create like jealousy and whatnot, resentment, because, oh, he wins all the time, but from my point of view, I would take that as a challenge to myself and be like, you know what, I want to see my name in that freaking thing, so I'm gonna work hard to achieve that. That's all.
Yeah, definitely. Those are good points and good ideas. Does anyone else have any just initial thoughts on the case before we get into some of the questions?
Well, I feel that it's very common for industries like the medical field to have this kind of stress, not only because there's different personalities, but because of the nature of their job. It's a very high stress kind of environment, because I mean, even though surgeries, I'm sure, are scheduled and everything, there's still there's things that could happen, that little mistakes that could have big consequences. And so I think that as people, as human beings, we are very kind of fight or flight kind of mode in these kinds of industries. And so I'm not surprised that the morale is low, because they don't have that camaraderie, and then that just causes more stress for everybody involved.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. So what do we think are some of they've been mentioned before, but what do we think are some of the root problems that Barbara is facing coming into this new unit, and what are the problems in the unit that she needs to fix?
Well, there's I go back to the lady that was there before, Betty Nolan. Because from what I could tell, I mean, obviously this problem persisted long ago, and Betty, when somebody's on the verge of retiring, and you start getting into a situation like that, they don't really care a whole lot about it because they're on their way out. I've seen it a lot of that happening. The mindsets change a little bit, and so when Barbara came in, she was picking up something that was pretty much in the dumps, way before, and had to kind of clean up a mess that was created. And so I know she accepted the challenge, and she knew it would be a challenge, but when you have a leadership that puts in a hiring freeze and a overtime freeze and all that into a company or into an area that is already a mess, and you don't have that camaraderie that is required to make it successful, I mean, you're almost just putting gas on a fire. And in order to get out of that, if they don't change anything, obviously this is going to fail and everybody's going to quit. They're gone. And so, the things that she's dealing with is just trying to keep people at work, because since she can't hire people, every time somebody quits, it just adds more and more to somebody else. Or they have to go into that RN pool of, people to come in that don't really know what's going on anyways. But she's also got to fight, that board, that nurses board or administration, and get the hiring freeze lifted. I understand the economy is bad, but it doesn't always work in your favor to get rid of employees when that's the lifeblood of your business. In the company I'm at, they went on a hiring freeze and a raise increase freeze and all that, and it really hurt the company's morale. However, the only thing that got people through it was the camaraderie that we have amongst coworkers is extremely good, and so we would help each other and feed off of that. I can't imagine if we didn't have that. I don't think people would have lasted very long. So the owners of the company have to be very careful when they do stuff like that. They could just take themselves right out of business if they're not careful. And so I can see that happening here, and Barbara's got to figure out how to fix that very quickly. I think she started off with having that meeting, outside the office meeting, and let people get things off their chest and start talking about it. That's a good sign and a good way to, get things moving. So I think she's on the right track, with that.
Yeah, I was thinking going along with that, they're being, overworked because they can't hire anybody else and they're not getting any overtime. And, it's hard to, where else are they supposed to find like motivation? I think that's one of the big problems that she's facing is there's not, at least right now, the employees don't feel motivated, and it says that there's not really a good, like review process. Like no one really feels like they're being acknowledged for their hard work. No one's really, not that it's all about pay, but no one's getting any like raises or anything. And so because none of them feel motivated to improve, they're not improving, and they're not really interested in improving much.
Well, I really like the Harvard reading that we had about that 4 basic need, because that's how I based my write up for this paper, was just that, like the need to bond, and the drive to bond, and then what was wrong with this picture, why they weren't feeling that drive, and so on and so forth. So I think just basing it off of those 4 drives, you could really see where the root of the problems were, as far as this specific case study, is that they don't have any of those 4 drives, basically, or not strong enough. And so that's why they have a dysfunction in the team.
Yep.
Yeah, well, that's perfect. That kind of leads us into our next. They sort of want us to talk about those 4 drives. They've kind of got a question for each of them. So we can move into that. The first one, it talks about the drive to acquire. So it just says, humans have a fundamental need to seek and acquire objects and experiences they value. Given the general scarcity of desired objects and experiences, this drive draws humans into competition with one another. So how well does their unit's reward system fulfill the drive to achieve and acquire as it is right now?
what is that reward system?
Yeah, I didn't read anything about that.
Well, so it really just says there's kind of not one. That's
Right.
kind of the problem.
Right.
That they have a review process, but then nothing happens. Like they said that they go through reviews, but they don't actually like reward anyone for having a good review, that it's all just kind of spread across the board. So maybe how can that reward system be improved while they're still on this, low budget and having budget cuts and stuff?
Well, I think you can go back to an idea. I had the same idea with what Carlos was saying, is you got to come up with something that may be that doesn't necessarily cost money, but gives people motivation to work. And, an employee of the month type thing can work. And especially if you can do perks that they could get, maybe they get the best parking spot, maybe they get, to leave work, early on Friday, maybe they get an extra half hour at lunch, I mean, you could do certain perks that don't necessarily cost money, that, could give a little bit of a drive for people when they understand that, that there's no money to be had, but they can, at least feel good about what they're doing, and know that someone is noticing. And my idea on it too is you have everybody vote, on who gets it. You just can't vote for yourself. And so that way it's you're being nominated by your coworkers, which, means even more. And it's not just, Barbara drawing somebody out of a hat or, seeing, one person do something great. It's what everybody's seeing. And so then it can mean more. And that way, if somebody gets nominated multiple times, there's not necessarily a jealousy factor because everyone's voting for, that individual. So, implementing something like that, can just give them little tiny perks. And maybe even Barbara, takes them out to lunch as one of the perks, and has a little one-on-one time with them. All those types of things can, change the morale of an organization very quickly.
I really like your ideas. My, when I was typing the paper, my thoughts didn't go far into, like, besides of the employee of the week, but I like that, getting off early or having a longer lunch. I think that would totally motivate people to work a little harder, along with a praise, being just, oh, great job, taking care of the patient and whatever, I really like your idea. So I think you made a good point when you said, like, some things doesn't have to cost money, especially if you are on a tight budget,
But I think too, as nurses, if you're familiar, I don't think that they would let them leave early if they're understaffed. I mean, the situation, my sister worked for basically a hospice unit, and they were understaffed. No, no budget, nothing. And so she was the manager, and so she had to do a brunt of all the work because it just comes to a point where you just can't do all that, And but I think that, maybe the lunch thing, because in reality, if you're paying a nurse $20 an hour, $30 an hour, a lunch of $15 is cheaper than letting them off early. Does that make sense? Because the pay wise.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, though, too, sometimes I feel like the upper management has to step in a way. I mean, I know if they're not certified nurses, but this paperwork or something that has to be done or something, then that's when you kind of see a change, because if you're running a business and you're not really worried about it because you're going to rag all of your lower employees, even your managers, you're not really suffering because you're just trying to keep the money for yourself to stay afloat, But like Jared said, if you're not careful, at the company that my sister ended up working for, they eventually got bought out because they just couldn't. And what happens is your patients, word of mouth on a business is a lot more detrimental or positive than, advertisement on a billboard. And so you have to be careful with that, because once, people, you start giving yourself a bad name, that spreads very quickly. Then, you have a great picture on a magazine or something. So,
Yeah.
Those are great points. Piggybacking on what was being said about the the scheduling. I think too that since Norris is the manager, doesn't she have a say on the scheduling? You know, maybe instead of like scheduling somebody early off on a Friday, you know, she can like maneuver it, or like if that person is the employee of the week or employee of the month, she gets to be put in a more like the better shift. You know how like nurses are like 24/7. What if she gets put in the morning shift? Or, you know, what if she gets one of like either a Saturday or Sunday offs? And that doesn't add any more money to or that doesn't take away money from the it doesn't ruin any financial aspect of scheduling. It's just kind of move things around. But what I was going to say is like as far as the kind of uh, performance reporting system that they have, I think too that she can kind of say, because I mean she kind of did that in the offsite where she's like, okay, tell me what is your biggest like grievances, right? And so they were telling her, so why can't she like do and say, okay, let's create a performance reporting system. What is the things, the quantifiable analysis that we can put in there so that we can, you know, use this as our standard in performing each other? And then what if she does, you know, this form can be filled out by her, by the staff members, and then even by the patients, so that there's this kind of transparency there, you know, like people can't say, oh, well, how come she got this grade of, you know, a high grade in this performance system? Well, nobody can say that because they were all in it, putting it together. So they know what is expected of them and what is required for them to get a good grade. And I think, anyways, that's what I think would work too.
Yeah, those are good ideas.
Yeah, definitely. Just while everyone was talking, I was thinking too, along with, you know, like more like physical rewards, I think verbal acknowledgement too just goes a long way. It sounds like everyone just feels like they're underappreciated. Like I know it says the one nurse, she was you know, spending her own time in classes and seminars and stuff. And she said, she's like, you know, I do this because you know, I want to, and I'm trying to improve myself, but you know, I don't really like that I don't get any acknowledgement for it. And she says, you know, whether it be verbal or compensatory, I mean, everybody wants, you know, compensatory acknowledgement, but I do think that just verbally it can go a long way just to say like, hey, you're doing a good job, or, oh, you know, that's great that you went to that seminar. Maybe you can, you know, help us out. Maybe you can lead like a quick meeting or something and teach us about what you learned at your class or seminar. I think just those little things can go a long way too. It doesn't always have to be physical. Well, those things help too, but just those little comments sometimes can go a long way to motivate people.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next drive that it talks about is the drive to bond. Humans have a fundamental emotional need to seek and develop mutual social commitments. This drive draws humans into collaboration one with another. So, how well does this unit's culture fulfill the drive to belong and bond, and what can they do to improve it?
0, none.
Right, yeah. They kind of don't get along at all.
That's why I think, you know, when she had that offsite meeting, I think that was the beginning of that. You know, she understood that they didn't really have that, and so I think she's on the right path, you know, doing things like that. But she can definitely implement something like that to get the culture, you know, more solid. And you know, once they can get kind of these things off their chest that, you know, is dragging them down, and then they can get everybody on board to help each other out and kind of, you know, be a team, then that will go a long way.
I think too, I mean, her boss, I guess, Nora or whatever, when they have these meetings where they're describing, I think the upper management should be invited to listen to what's going on. You know, a lot of times we don't know what's really going on until we, witness it, or they should be making trips to see how really the unit's running. When you go in and you see something with your eyes, you can see, where the lack is or what needs to be improved or what's working.
Yeah.
So I really really think that upper management should be involved in the business than hands off.
Yep. Yeah, because then they'd really see how that hiring freeze is affecting them, especially when it doesn't make sense to me when you're on a hiring freeze and people quit and you still don't hire. It doesn't make any sense to me because you already had a lot of that budget of employees there. So they need to see firsthand that they've lost those people, what effect it's having on the rest. Because if they don't fully understand that, they're just going to figure out just do it on your own. But if they can physically see it and kind of put themselves in their shoes, then they may understand and change their mind.
Well, what I put in mind, with just thinking about the bond and the culture, I liked what it said in that Harvard piece where it says people need to break old attachments and form new ones. And so I thought about, well, why don't she schedule, if it's a 12-hour shift, why don't she schedule one of the veteran nurses with the new one, so that the veteran, if there's only two nurses, maybe at one point, so that, the old one has to be forced. I know it's kind of sound bad, but they have to communicate with the new one and maybe form those new bonds instead of just sticking with their friends or established friends within the unit. And I also thought about, why not implement a once a month potluck in their department? I just think that food is universal and, everyone has to eat. And so I figured going back to that lesson that we had about psychological safety, and, how in that reading, it says that you have to have these bonds outside of work in order to get to know each other personally. So maybe, when they're eating during break time, when all these food are out there, they can have personal conversations that would hopefully get to know each other on a personal level. And then maybe that will increase their bonds within the unit. Because, I think about it is I think that the hospital itself has its issues, but you know how Stephen Covey says inside out. So we have to work on our department first and then go out. And so I totally understand what Amy was saying, that the higher up people should be part of this, and I totally get that. But I feel part of it's well, they're really we can do more within our group, have more change than waiting for them to make changes in our group. Does that make sense? That's just how I see it.
Yeah. Ideally, the upper management's not going to do anything in a hospital setting because they frankly don't care.
Yeah.
That's not their job. They're specific, this is my job and I'm just going to do my job. So, but I think it's going to cost money in some form. Even if someone brings potluck, you can't really do nothing. You really can't do anything in life without some kind of money, So it's either if they, invite each other out, after a shift on this day to go, I don't know, see a band or go bowling or something. Some kind of money, either it's coming out of, their pocket or someone else's.
Yeah. Yeah, I was kind of thinking along those lines. I was kind of going back to our Google case study all about, teams and groups and how to foster that, psychological safety so that everyone feels like, they can share their thoughts and feelings without, being put down. And, I was thinking about how it talked about just sort of fostering that camaraderie, and how can this group kind of become more comfortable and sort of become friends with each other, and maybe having some sort of activity, try to keep it as cheap as possible, but just a setting that doesn't have the stress of work with it. Even in this offsite meeting, she could do some fun activities or something where they can just, enjoy time outside of work, actually just being friends with each other and just kind of being normal. And enjoying time. I think that kind of helps. Whereas when you're in a sort of strict work setting all the time, it's hard to develop friendships sometimes. And, you know, if you're not really feeling friendly with each other, then things can probably come off as being more like rude when you speak to people, or you just don't feel like you don't feel comfortable to bring things up with someone that you're not very close with. And then I was also thinking, you know, it looks like one of the main problems is that they've got these veteran nurses that sort of think that the younger nurses are just annoying, but the younger nurses are like, no, like we want feedback. We want to know how we're doing. We want your help. And I think people like to share their expertise for the most part. Like if someone feels like they're good at something, they want to have the opportunity to share it. But you know, sometimes when someone's like constantly asking you lots and lots of questions and you're like, okay, just leave me alone. I'm just trying to work. It's not always a good way. So, you know, maybe they can develop some sort of, you know, once a week or once a month, you know, training meetings or something where these older nurses can teach the younger ones in a setting that they don't feel like they're being annoyed or bombarded with questions, but they still get to sort of share their expertise and provide feedback, and the younger ones still get to learn from them without it being in a like a bad or rude sort of situation.
Yeah. And you have to remember, you know, because we go through a lot of training here, and if you focus on the training, I mean, it helps everybody, and eventually the questions that you're asked diminish. You know, it's just being patient and getting through that initial, you know, bombardment of training and whatnot and questions. But ultimately, it helps everybody, and it makes the job way easier on everybody if you can, you know, just kind of do it. And especially if maybe they designate, you know, say one of the younger ones gets trained on something, and now they have to go train some of the younger, you know, more in their class. So it's not always the senior ones, and maybe they can alternate who's doing what, so it's not put on one person. But there's definitely a way that you can put it together that will definitely help everybody in the long run, for sure.
I also think that it has something to do with their not totally understanding their job descriptions. Because that one veteran lady that was saying in the offsite, you know, she comes into this like really her focus is her patients, but because of the younger ones keep on asking her questions, she feels like she's not able to do the job that she feels she needs to do, you know, take care of her patients. And so that's why she gets a little, you know, she gets irritated at the newer nurses because it pulls her from her job. And so I think that if they have kind of like this bullet points of, okay, as a veteran nurse or as this kind of nurse, this is part of your job. So maybe then they would understand that it's part of my job to help my fellow nurses.
Yeah, that kind of leads into our next one, the drive to comprehend. So it says that humans have a fundamental emotional need to develop understandings of their environments and themselves. This drive draws humans into collecting information, building new knowledge, exploring new possibilities, and finding meaning in their activities in life. So, how well does the unit's job design fulfill the drive to challenge and comprehend? And you know, if it doesn't, since it's kind of vague, you know, what can we do to improve their job design, job functions to still get everything done, get all the administrative work done, but still, you know, have everyone feel like they're caring for patients as their main role.
Mm-hmm. What I want to know too is, you know, when if somebody takes a vacation or is sick, they pull in from that pool of RNs. Why can't they pull that in when people quit? Like, why aren't they able to pull in, you know, the 3 or 4 or 5 people to fill in for those who quit if they can pull in when somebody's sick or on vacation?
Well, what's crazy though, too, like if you know nursing, so if you hire someone, they come in at a lower rate. If you use a PRN, they get like way more money. So why wouldn't they, on a budget wise, just hire someone else?
Right. But they already have the approval to have one of them come in when somebody's gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, because they talk about, you know, nurses having to do other things, you know, the administration work or whatever. Why can't they have those people come in and do it? And that way, maybe it won't affect patient care as well because they're not the ones in front of the patients.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about that, of why they couldn't utilize that better if that's already approved.
Well, I'm just wondering, maybe these kinds of nurses are actually on rotation, like they're being used by this department and another department. And so if you put them permanently in one, then you lose those rotating nurses that could be used for all other departments. That's
Yeah.
what I
They could
wondering.
still be on a rotation, so it's not like a permanent position. They could still rotate, but it's just those nurses are the ones coming in doing that administration work. And that way they always have, 2 or 3 in there, doing kind of the stuff that takes away the main nurses, treating patients.
Mhm.
I think though, if the bonds get made, like if they're able to help each other out, like say she's in surgery, well, this person needs something, but she's doing her paperwork. And if they were more friends, they'd be like, okay, I'm having a couple of free seconds. I can run, do that. And working together collectively instead of like, this is my job. I'm going to do my job and that's it. And usually when you have that focus, it makes everyone have 10 times as much work because, the flow of things. If you're like, okay, I'm running over here to get this meds, I'll do this, or the gauze, I'll get the gauze, or, the gown, whatever, like working together. But it is hard, the situation, because they're expecting a lot from their nurses. And, eventually people just get worn out when you treat them like that.
Yeah. As humans, you only can take it for so long.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But I think like the beginning, if you like do the thing of like the lunch or something, nurses love to bring in lunch, and doctors, like they love that. But also what Barbara could do, and maybe it's not her job, she could get the oh gosh, the drug reps. They always bring in food. That's like part of their job. So like make connections, and where they're not even affording that, but it's like a good, awesome, like they can expect every, twice a month on Thursdays, the drug reps are going to come in and bring food. And that's not extra. I mean, that's a win-win on the drug rep side and on the unit side.
I think one thing, and we haven't even brought this up, is where's the doctors and physicians in all this? I mean, these nurses and whatnot are their lifeblood to what they do. They're the ones that should be patting them on the back, bringing them an extra treat, defending them. I mean, where are these guys?
Mhm.
I mean, they should be the one to really battle and fight to get more nurses, because this is affecting them, just as bad. And they're the ones that make a lot of money too. So, for me, it wouldn't be. I mean, I'd also work on them and say, hey, when they do something good, compliment them. It speaks highly of. When it comes from you, they really appreciate it. And that one nurse, when they had that meeting, said how belittling they get talked to and how mean people are.
Yes, they are. Doctors can be mean.
Yeah, that's got to change. And I know
Mhm.
there's things that happen on the job, in certain situations. That's fine, and you got to learn to not take it personally. But it doesn't mean that you can't be nice to them when that opportunity arises as well. And so I think a lot of this holds accountability to the physicians as well.
Yeah, I think the only time it really mentions them, it just says that relationships were tense not only between the nursing staff but also with many of the unit's attending physicians. So I think it's just they're sort of having the same problems where they just don't really get along and it's just tense and
They should hug each other for 10 minutes before each shift.
one with
Now
a
they
good
might have
attitude.
lawsuits.
Okay, so the
Well,
last
it just shows the issue actually, really, if you look at this in a bigger perspective, it stems from the upper management of the whole hospital. If the doctors are not happy, if the nurse, there's something wrong with the whole hospital. It's not just this unit. So just maybe even the whole field, the whole medical field, which I am not surprised at all, because I've seen that over here in our area too, how easily like the door swings so fast in a lot of the doctors the hospitals and the doctor offices over here.
Yeah, and it starts at the top. Things trickle down. So it's got to, that feeling of wanting to repair this has got to start at the top. And it's got to trickle through the physicians down to the nurses. I mean, the nurses and stuff are kind of one of the bottom end people. So they got to be treated well. I mean, they're the lifeblood of the hospital, So, I mean, when I'm at a hospital, I see my doctor for 30 seconds and I see the nurse for, 10 days. So, I mean, they're the livelihood of the hospitals, and they need to be treated with respect.
Yep, definitely. So the last drive is the drive to defend. It says that humans have a fundamental emotional drive to defend our accomplishments and fulfilling our other three drives. When such accomplishments are threatened, humans experience fear or anger and respond by flight or fight. And the question is, how well does the unit's performance management system fulfill the drive to depend and defend? So it kind of says that they do have some sort of annual review process, but then it says, the one lady says, she's like, I've heard that everyone gets compensated the same regardless of how our annual reviews go. So, what's the point? So it's obviously not working. So maybe what's a better review system or performance management system that they could, input. So we talked about kind of the reward system earlier. So that's kind of similar, but how can they, do this review system unit wide?
I think Catherine, though, like that's the 5 dysfunctions, how everyone's talking together. I was reading in the scriptures today about, Limhi, when they went and attacked Limhi's people because they thought they stole the daughters, but it was the Kingsman that did it. And so just the miscommunication of people assuming one thing or thinking this thing can lead sometimes tragically. And so the open discussion about how everyone feels, their perception could be way different than what you think that they're thinking. And so I like the meetings just to know, like, oh, you're thinking that? Shoot, I didn't realize that, because we can assume all day long that this is how someone's taking something or this is how they're feeling. But, for instance, my daughter forever, it took me a long time. She would get so mad about things and like craziness, but like when I got down to it, she was actually fearful about things and she took it out in anger. But she wasn't really angry, she was scared. And so sometimes when we outwardly show something, that's not really the root cause of what we're feeling. And I think when you communicate with each other, you're able to realize, what people are. Someone's like looking mad. When I concentrate, I look mad, my husband says, but I'm not mad. I'm just thinking. So if you know that about me, at first you'd be like, oh my gosh, she looks so mad. But if you know, oh, she must be deep in thought, if you know who I am. So, you know what I mean? Those kind of things can make the morale and the day-to-day working together weird if you don't really know who each other are.
Yeah.
Well, I like what it said in the well, not but I thought it was profound when they said in that Harvard article that when people are feeling the need to defend, that it will result in the quest to create institutions that promote justice. So, however that looks to them, and I think that's one of the reasons why people are being, individualistic, is because they feel like there's an injustice, and so in their thinking, well, I'm just going to do my own thing because nobody, that's the way for me to promote justice. But I think really the key here, because I mean, people were saying that the performance thing, the system was a mystery. So to combat that, just transparency in everything. I started working on the readings for lesson 12, and they're talking about the company Patagonia. And one of the things that it said there was that the owners of Patagonia, they have their financial, like all of their like financial information on a website for all of the employees to look at. So they kind of know, like, where is all the money of that company going and stuff. And so they might have questions, they might have doubts of, like, you know, how are you spending the money of this company? But it's there for them to look at. So I think as far as this case is concerned, you know, they could do that. Hopefully that the upper management can be open to that, where there's the transparency of, like, okay, this is how the performance was graded. And so people could ask questions, but then, you know, they see it. So it's not a mystery anymore, and they won't feel the need to be individualistic because they feel like there's an injustice there.
You know, when I think about the, you know, drive to defend too, Barbara has got to go to battle. She's their voice, and everybody needs somebody to fight for them. And so Barbara's got to really do her job in fighting with management to get these perks, you know, hiring freeze done, overtime lifted, you know, those kinds of things. She's really got to defend and fight for them, and they need to know it. They need to know that they can count on her and know that she's got their back. That'll go a long way with the morale of the unit.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking the same thing. Like that, well, you know, what can she do to fight for her employees? You know, bring it up to her boss that, like, hey, I've, you know, kind of done an analysis here, and these are what I think the problems are, and this is how I think that they can be mitigated. But, you know, you've got to help me out here, and they'll definitely feel more appreciated if they feel like, you know, she's fighting for them to have, you know, better better compensation, and they won't be, you know, overworked as much if they, you know, have enough people working for them. So
yeah, I mean, I'd be a pest, you know, to that management group. I'd meet with them minimum once a week and bring things up, you know, and they can get annoyed, that's fine, but I'd make it where they get annoyed and they then reconsider. You know, you got to be a pest in them in order for them to listen, and she's got to be that pest, and she's got to be that punching bag, so to speak, for everybody else. He's the one that's got to take it.
yeah, definitely. So what are going to be, and some of the, you know, suggestions that we've discussed that she can do to improve her unit? What are going to be some obstacles that she should anticipate, and how should she address those obstacles that are going to come up with implementing these changes?
Well, I think some of the older ladies, I worked with some old ladies doing food tasting at Costco at one time, and they are like set in their ways, and like they complain sometimes about the silliest stuff, and you know, you can't change someone. If you've tried to do that, I've tried to, it doesn't work. Like, they have to be willing to change. But if you can redirect their conversations, like, can you believe blah, 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 then you just go, oh, well, and then point out something positive. And I think the more you do it, you know, either they'll change or they won't. Or some people, you know, might not put up with it, and they'll just be like, okay, well, I'm going to go somewhere else, you know. Or she can say, well, Barbara really cares, you know, every time she's coming to think about us, you know, talk to us what's going on, and I'm willing to stick it out. You know, they're going to either say that, or they're going to be like, peace out. I'll find another place to work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, obviously she's still going to have an obstacle of, you know, the hiring freeze and the overtime, you know, and that management and whatnot. So she's still got to deal with that. You know, that can be things she fights for, but for right now, that's going to be an obstacle, you know, trying to change the morale of this group. So you still got to figure that out. But I think I think she needs to tap into that RN pool and see if she can't pull some of them in more frequently, just to relieve some of the, you know, duties, the miscellaneous duties that they have. And I think that could be something that will help. But that'll be a major obstacle to overcome.
Yeah, I think that it's funny that the management, when she got hired, they told her, you know, we want you to fix this and fix it fast. And I'm like, were they like unaware of what was going on, or they just were like, whatever, she'll fix it, but we don't have to get involved, because that not being able to offer raises and be or hire new people is gonna be tough. How I will be like, how do you want me to fix all this if you're not giving me the tools that I need to help? I mean, to fix this, to make some improvement. I mean, there is so much that I can do, and I need you to, step into the plate and be like, you know what, we got your back, or we'll reconsider or think about, if especially if it involves money, but don't just be like, oh yeah, we want you to fix all this, but we don't want to help you. It kind of reminds me of being that choosy beggar. I need all this, but I don't want to spend any money for it. I need a new phone, but don't give me a flip phone or like a brick one. Give me a new iPhone. But hopefully she'll be able to make some progress, especially with the morale. And if not, I think it would be better for her just to leave the place and get a different a different job, where she can be supported, especially by the guys, in the management.
Yeah. I know one thing I was thinking that might be a problem is like, I don't know. I think sometimes when you're trying to really make change, sometimes you might have someone on the team who's just so detrimental. And I'm like, what if she's got to maybe like let someone go, but they're on this hiring freeze, so they can't replace them. And so, is it better to leave someone on the team that's hurting everybody else and not, not willing to change, not willing to improve? Or, maybe they have to fire somebody, but then they can't replace them. So everyone's just going to be even more overworked. So is it better to just like try to deal with this one person well, I was thinking maybe that, is going to be an issue, because I feel like in this kind of situation that almost always happens. Like there's always like at least one person who's just like, they gotta go, and so, she's probably going to run into that.
Yep.
Well, my suggestion on that was to do the 3-strike rule, where, I mean, she lets her staff know, like, look at you, if complaints come, you can get 2 warnings, and, during that warning period, we can have one-on-one meetings, like what we've talked about before, where, the manager can talk individually to the person and then kind of mentor them, like, how can I help you help, situation and all that, that stuff. So she can promote the 3-strike warning in that regard, so that they can at least have they could at least have 2 warnings before they know that they're going to have to be, fired or let go. And some, I mean, that's kind of what the book Catherine's going through, and Mikey is that, she's just oblivious to the negativity that she brings to the team, but she was given a lot of times before she was let go. So, but my suggestion was, how, as far as the issue about the upper management not really caring, is what Covey talked about, how proactive people focuses their efforts on the circle of influence. So I feel like for this particular department, yeah, there's so many things that Norris and her people can't really change because of the upper management. But if they put their focus on the things that they can do as a group, then maybe their circle of concern will grow bigger, as their circle of influence would grow bigger too.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. They're all really good points. Does anyone have any last closing remarks or suggestions or thoughts on this?
I just want to say, drive safe, Amy. I didn't even realize you're driving now. Drive safe wherever you're going.
Yeah, I'm driving now. I have to multitask. I think though too, like, talking about boundaries with people, and there probably wasn't safe boundaries before when the old boss was kind of checked out. But reestablishing boundaries can be hard with people, even with the upper management, you know, asking them, they want me, you know, what is their expectations? They want you to change it, but how? Like, what are some ways that you have, you know, your opinions on how to change it? And then just setting new boundaries. And with that always takes, you know, bumps in the road. But when you're able to establish new boundaries and keep up, you know, keep with it, you know, like Grace, she said the 3 strikes you're out or whatever. But sometimes things have to get really worse before they get better. And that's just how, you know, life kind of goes. But hopefully, you know, this is a real situation. They overcame it. If not, they probably got bought out. So.
Yeah.
Yep, definitely. So do we want to just discuss real quick what day and what time for sure we want to meet for lesson 13 in 2 weeks?
Well, do you think, because I mean, I know we have stuff to submit. I haven't looked ahead. I'm sorry. I'm not one that looks ahead this semester. I can barely get things done when I need to be. But with not meeting, like, give us enough time for like present to have our stuff prepared so we can just go ahead and knock it out. I mean, I don't think there's a time limit. Do you think there'll be like share for 7 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. You guys are like, you guys plan ahead, so you guys tell me what.
I don't really know the exact instructions. Like I said, it's not open, so I can't really tell you exactly.
It looks like
but
she said it's not going to open until Friday the 20th. Is that right on her announcement?
Well, so lesson 14, she's opening the ones that are like due on the 27th. She's opening it so that it could be done before the 23rd.
Right, like Friday the 20th, because right?
Yeah, and so the lesson on the 14 is the final project, and then the 360, and then a final self-assessment. So pretty easy stuff. But the final project, I don't know exactly what it entails. It's just that the way that I've seen it on the videos on YouTube is that they do a PowerPoint presentation. So each one of us will do a presentation, and we'll talk about a little bit of a summary of what our goals were, like how we achieved it, or did we have any consequences, and that, you know, like all that stuff, what we learned, and blah blah blah. And so it doesn't have to be 7 minutes, but I just think that in order for us to fully tell everybody what encompassed our project, it will take more than 5 minutes, I think. So that's just what I think, but I don't know exactly.
Maybe everyone needs to prepare a Cliff Note version of your project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It says that lesson 14 is supposed to open on July 14th, which is a week from tomorrow. And then after that, you know, Saturday, that whole week is week 13. So, I mean, I think that'll give. If you want
to keep Friday, you can. And I can just figure out something else. It's not a big deal. I'll be on the bus for youth conference, so I doubt I will be able to talk for an hour or 2 hours.
Yeah.
And we could even, too, if need be, those who need to, you know, come on quick, share their thing and leave, you know, can do that too. Like, not everybody has to stay on for the hour as well. I mean, we could definitely work around people's schedule as far as that goes to make sure that if you have 5 minutes, just come present and then go, you know, as well. So.
Yeah.
And we have the, I mean, it's not mandatory to record our meeting, but we could record our meeting for everybody else that would miss it, so they could at least hear what everybody else's reports were. I mean, if that works for you, Amy, I mean, you can hop on, give your report, and then hop back off and then just watch later on.
Yeah, whatever you guys, whatever the majority.
So do we want to wait and see when that opens up to finalize when a good date would be? Or, I mean, if we do it earlier than a Friday, I can do Wednesday, but it's got to be early, unfortunately, because I have meetings later on. So I can do 6:30 Pacific time on Wednesday. Otherwise, I can still do Friday normal time. So, I mean, that's just kind of my schedule. I mean, if you guys need to meet, a different time, you definitely can, and then I can pop in and do that as well. Do my thing for 5 minutes. So, I mean, I don't want to stop anybody, especially with graduation coming up. I know a few of you have, graduation stuff to do, so we definitely want to work around, that as well.
Yeah. So
do you just have to share it with one person, right, from our group, or the teacher?
she made it sound like it wasn't too specific. Like, we're supposed to all share it with our group, but she said, like, even if that doesn't work out, if like you're, graduating or something, like she said that you could like do it with her and just share it with her directly and not even share it with any members of your group.
Yeah, that's my understanding too. I mean, we can even have, like, the way I understood it is like those people that would want to present early, we could even have those people present on lesson 13 on the 20th, and then everybody else could meet again on that week of 23rd to the 27th and then do their presentation. So we don't have to have everybody do it on the 20th if that takes too much of everybody's time too.
Yeah. I was thinking we could just do our regular, Friday meeting, and we can discuss our case study like normal. And then afterwards, like, if you have time to hang around and watch, then stay and watch. And if you don't, then log off, and whoever needs to present can present if it's, ready. And then if you're not ready or whatever, or you just don't have time, then they can have another meeting, the next week or something. But we can discuss it when it gets closer. It's still a couple weeks out, but we can all be thinking about what would work for us.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
We'll see ya.
See you.
Bye.